Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tactical Harmony. And I am elated to introduce today's guest, Chris Miles. Chris is the cash flow expert, an unapologetic anti financial advisor who helps high income earners break free from the grind and achieve financial freedom. Chris built multiple streams of passive income and retired two times before the age of 40. As founder of Money Ripples and author of Work Optional Blueprint, he has helped clients create over 300 million in cash flow. Featured in CNN Money, Bigger Pockets, and Entrepreneurs on Fire, Chris reveals how to stop working for money and start living free, wealthy, and abundant. Chris, my friend, welcome to the Tactical Harmony Show.
Rebecca, I'm elated to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. So I'm gonna start with you call yourself the anti-financial advisor,
Mhm.
and I would love for you to elaborate what exactly that means and how you differentiate yourself from other financial advisors in the United States.
Yeah, because I kind of believe that although they're good-hearted, most financial advisors kind of suck. When it comes to creating financial freedom, and I know that firsthand because I used to be one. I actually started off being a financial advisor in the early 2000s. I never intended to become a financial advisor. I actually wanted to become a business consultant, but I figured I should have real life business experience before I just go and get an MBA and come out as a snot-nosed college grad thinking I know everything. So I actually took a sabbatical from college to find some business to start. And the first one that was interesting is being a financial advisor because I figured, worst case, I learn about money, not to mention learn about business, right? So that's the route I took. And then I'd like to be in my own boss, my own entrepreneur, if that's even a word, my own entrepreneur. Um, Trying to be a small business owner, I liked to doing it so much that I actually never went back to finish my degree. I stayed dropped out of college. So I'm a college dropout, so to speak, right? But I went down that path. And I drank the Kool-Aid for 4 years. I was actually very into the, set and forget it mentality. You save everything, spend nothing, save it forever, and hopefully you compound enough interest so that someday you have something. And after 4 years, my dad reached out to me. He says, "Well, Chris, when are you going to advise me?" Understand, my dad was like the penny pinching saver. I mean, this guy was post depression era, the kind of guy that threw away nothing. He was the one that told me never to have debt, never, to always just save, 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 right? Buy everything on sale. I mean, when I was 8 years old, like I ate Cap'n Crunch for an entire year straight because there was a case lot sale. Luckily, the next year we switched to Fruity Pebbles to give my mouth a break. So it was that kind of life that I grew up with, and that's why I made it so easy to be a financial advisor because basically they teach you how scarcity too, right? So I was going down that path, and then my dad reached out, and so I was sitting down with him, and he says, "Chris, I'm 61 years old. The stress from this job is literally killing me. I've already had heart attacks. I've already had strokes. I want to be out." And I looked at all his finances. I said, "Dad, you've done a great job. You're debt free, including your house. You've been stuffing money in your 401k, getting the company matched like every good boy should." And I said, "But despite all that, Dad, if you try to retire today, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because you'll run out of money." He said, "Well, that's not what I wanted to hear. What do I do? How do I retire?" I said, "I don't know. Work longer, save more. I mean, that's about all I can recommend." And so that bothered me because remember, he was like the poster child of what you're supposed to do, even including the very role model I was patterning my own savings and my own life after, thinking it was going to work. And here he is, proof that financial advising does not work. So about a month later, I'm speaking with a friend of mine who I trained to be a financial advisor, but then he went to go do real estate investing. And he starts telling me, he's like, "Well, Chris, my dad and I have partnered on some real estate deals and we've doubled his income as a professor at the local university." I said, "Hold on a second. There's no way that's possible. That's too good to be true. I can't handle that kind of, possibility, there's no way." And he says, "Well, Chris, let me ask you a question. How many of your clients are actually financially free where they don't worry about money?" I said, "Well, none. They all worry about money." Okay, good. Well, Chris, I didn't expect you to be honest, but thank you for doing so. How about this, Chris? How many of you guys, as financial advisors, are financially free, not off your commissions, but actually doing the investments you've been recommending? As I thought about it, I realized, I don't know, there's been guys working here since the 1970s. So I would say none. There's your problem. And I kind of took this matrix red pill, so to speak, kind of woke up and started looking at things more like in the real estate world, realized that there were people that were financially free, people that were multimillionaires by their 20s and 30s doing that, where I'm trying to scrimp and save and become a millionaire, hopefully by my 60s, doing the traditional methods. And the next thing I know, later that well, not only did I quit because I is either I keep teaching what I taught, as a financial advisor and just put blinders on, or I keep my integrity intact and I quit. And so I quit. I said, I'll never teach you about money again. I'll be a mortgage broker because in 2006, anybody could be a mortgage broker. So I'd be a mortgage broker and I would teach ballroom dancing on the side and stuff. Well, later that year, as I'm starting to get into real estate and stuff, I start to realize, especially where I start to shift my mindset away from the accumulation theory that they always teach in financial advising to more of an acceleration model, more of a cash flow passive income, much like what you hear Rich Dad Poor Dad teach about, right? Once I switched to that and started to practice it, the next thing I know, later that next year, I had about 4 to 5 thousand a month coming in, which was more than what I needed at the time to live on. And so I actually became financially independent when I was 28, almost 29 years old. And of course, everybody wanted to know how I did it, right? So eventually I came out of retirement in 2007, started teaching people how to do it, went broke in the recession, dug myself out of debt, like over $1 million of debt, and then had to do it again. And eventually by 2016, paid off the debt. We got financially free. The second time, I had enough passive income to pay all my bills again. Needed a little bit more than 4,000 a month at that point because I had a bigger family and inflation. But either way, like I got to there the second time. So it's not because I was a brilliant guy that I got there twice. It's because I screwed up the first time and had to do it again.
Yeah, we pay attention to when we fall down, or
Mhm.
I'm doing air quotes for those of you who are listening, failure, right? And I always say that failure is one of my favorite F words, because we learn so much from it. We pay
Yeah.
attention to it, right? Like it's upsetting a little bit, like why did I fail? And so it has a greater emotional charge, if you will. We pay attention, and the key is you just try not to do that again. You learn from it, you grow, and you continue on the path. So, okay, I got to ask you, age 28 and you
Mhm.
were financially free. How did that feel at that young age? Like that financial freedom? Like, what did that taste like?
It was unbelievable. And I mean unbelievable, meaning like I still couldn't believe it actually happened.
Yeah.
Um, it was one of those things where like, wait a minute, am I dreaming? Is this real? Did I just get lucky? And I did ask that question even going into 2007. I was like, did I just get lucky because the market was really nice and hot, which it was, and I did get a little bit lucky, of course, because there was timing there. But no, like it was just it. It seemed almost like too easy compared to the path that I was on, which was sacrifice, suffer, and save. And I was the kind of guy that, like my dad, would turn off the heat in the winter, turn off the AC in the summer, right, just to save a few bucks. I was pretty miserable to be married to, So, I mean, so it definitely like it was to all of a sudden then say, wait a minute, I've seen more money come into my life than I've ever seen. And it was ironic because when I didn't need the money, it was easier to make money. And that's one secret thing that I tell a lot of business owners, especially when they're like, "Well, I make millions of dollars in my business." I'm like, "Well, that's great. But if that business were to go away today, are you gonna be okay?" And I tell them, "It's like, there's one secret I've learned in business is that when you don't need the money, that's when everybody wants to do business with you. It's when you need the money, when you got that what I call business breath, right? When you reek of it, that's when people don't want to do business with you because they sense the desperation and they don't trust you. Where when you're relaxed and you don't need the money, that's when money wants to come in your life. It's kind of like I call it like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone type concept. Voldemort couldn't get the stone because he wanted it, he needed it, but Harry Potter got it because he didn't need it, right? And it's very much like that with money. Is that when you realize that you don't really need the money anymore, that's when you start to be more open and abundant, and you actually attract more money in. And it doesn't sound very tactical, but mindset is a very tactical thing. It does create real results in life.
Yeah, you're speaking my love language now. Yes, everything starts, if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others. It starts with your mindset.
Mhm.
How are you thinking? What are you believing? What is your identity? Because you're gonna show up like a force if to defend your identity and what you believe in, even
Yeah.
if it's BS or if it's not true. And so that kind of tees me up really well for this next question. you referenced your father and some of the things that, kind of how he lived, and I grew up in the same exact way, very humbly in Northeast Ohio, and the lights were off. And what do you think? I'm made of money, and money doesn't grow on trees, and money's the root of all evil, and you have to slave and slave and slave for what? And the government's going to take your money, and that was like that blueprint. Now, I've redefined my relationship with money since then. I view it as currency, as a resource. It flows in, it flows out. It's beautiful. But I'm curious for you, how were you able to harness the mindset that is abundant when you grew up with that kind of scarcity mindset? Like, how were you able to harness that very strong mentality that obviously led to your success?
Yeah, I think we had the same dad, even though my dad was in Oregon, not Ohio, but still same O state, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he actually said those very same things. Hey, I'm not made of money. What do you think what do you think I made of money? Money doesn't grow on trees, those kind of things. We can't afford it. I would hear that all the time growing up. And I use that language even as a financial advisor. And I think what's many people don't realize is that, and this is not true of all financial advisors, but there are a lot of people, and it was pervasive. I worked in an office that probably had 100 financial advisors, and that scarcity thinking and talking, and that you just got to keep save, 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 and sacrifice, all that kind of stuff, right? And delay gratification, but it becomes forever. And don't even get me started on the whole marshmallow experiment, right? It's like I like the marshmallow experiment where they say, hey, the kids that didn't take the marshmallows immediately, or they got more marshmallows, became disciplined later as adults. Yeah, but some of those people are miserable adults now too, right? So there's a balance. And what shifted for me was after that conversation with my friend, right? So if I were to give you the in between, like, what the rest of the story, what happened is that I kind of just, after I admitted, I'm like, hey, I don't, yeah, my people, my clients, and not just my clients, but clients that I inherited from decades of financial advisors aren't financially free. No financial advisors financially free. I said, okay, I'm open, I'm listening. So what do I do? And my friend, honestly, he's like, I'm not going to give you the answer because you just got done arguing with me just a few minutes ago beforehand that stocks are better than real estate, because I was arguing that point. As I was like, hey, historically speaking, the SP 500, you put $1 in 1928, you'll have a lot more than if you put it into real estate, right? And I'm like, no, listen, you got me. I'm open. Give me something. He's like, all right, if you really are, and I don't think you are, there's a book you should get called Who Took My Money by Robert Kiyosaki, which is basically just it's a lesser known rich dad book, but just says that pretty much mutual funds suck. Um, and he's like, and then go listen to this AM talk radio show that these guys doing locally here in Utah at the time. And he says, listen to their show. They do a show every morning from 9 to 11. Take a listen. And they're like two real estate investors, right? Here's what's interesting though. So I got the book, got it done like in a day, but then eventually after this was like during the Christmas to New Year's weekend break. So they had gone off the air for a week. So I had to wait till after New Year's. So the next week, the AM Talk radio show comes on. And what shocked me as I was listening to it every morning, I rearranged my schedule to do that to make sure I could be listening from 9 to 11. And what was crazy is that they wouldn't talk about strategies. It was crazy. I was like, these are real estate investors. Aren't they supposed to be telling me how they make all this money in real estate? But they wouldn't. They would talk about founding fathers, right? And how the country was started and, these inalienable rights and even just like these, principles, right? Principles of prosperity that have existed since the beginning of time and how they keep continuing. And it led to this abundance versus scarcity conversation very often. So they would talk about things like for example, to me, money was a zero sum game, right? So in my scarcity mindset, I would think that if I wanted to make more money, somebody else would have to lose, right? And so of course, if I'm a benevolent person, I would take it, take one for the team. I would be the guy that's like, hey, I'll cut my commissions back so you make more money as Mr. Client, right? Even when I was a mortgage broker, I'd be like, hey, I'll cut my fees back so you guys will do it. And then the crazy thing is people would still shop me even though I was like, "I'll give you the better fees and the better rate." Like, "You can't get anybody better." And they're like, "No, let me just go look around." Because I was looking at a lens of scarcity, a win-lose scenario. And whether they knew it or not, there's probably a subconscious thing that,
Oh, yeah.
kind of had a radar to say, "Oh, okay, so is it really a win for me or not?" That they probably would question my motives, right? And when I realized, like, no, that the real secret of money is dollars follow value. dollars follow value you create for other people. How do you add value? How do you serve people or solve problems in a way where you become so invaluable, they want to pay money to have you in their life, right? Or that product or whatever it is that you offer. And I started to hyper focus on that. And it was funny because I remember going out with some friends in March when I quit being a financial advisor. I went out with some friends who were, better off than I was financially. And one of them joked to me, he's like, haha, did you get that Mercedes yet? Just kind of being a little jerk. And I said, how'd you know? Like I'm actually going to be buying a Mercedes by July when I have to renew my car's registration. He's like, oh, really? And it shocked them because like there was this different level of faith, right? Because so they started asking conversation like, well, how much money have you made doing this? I'm like, nothing. I'm just excited because there's this whole other world possibility. The fact that it's not about accumulation, it's acceleration of money, creating cash flow income now, passive income now versus waiting decades for this money to come in. Like I was like, my mind was opening up to these possibilities. So there was some strategy on the real estate side that was kind of giving me a glimpse, even though I didn't know exactly everything that was there, but I was studying and learning. And then of course I started focusing on how do I create win-win for people because that's all I could remember with the whole dollars full of value thing. And so I look at that, like, how do I create the win-win? And one thing that came up as an idea at the time was one of the guys that was a millionaire that was part of that group. He was starting to mentor me, and he's like, so do you like doing mortgages? I said, I'll be honest, I love teaching about mortgages, but I hate paperwork, despise it. He's like, well, why don't you find somebody who does like doing paperwork? Now, in my scarcity brain, because when I was a financial advisor, especially, I would never want to share commissions if I didn't have to, because that would take more away from me, right? So I'd be the do-it-yourselfer. I'd be the guy that would not just sell you mutual funds and insurances, and I even sell, do like debt plans and all that kind of stuff. Like and mortgages, right? I was doing everything. And I'm like, well, are there people out there that actually like doing paperwork? He's like, trust me, there are nerdy people that would love to do your paperwork. And so I went to my broker and I asked, I said, hey, is there somebody that fits this description? He's like, oh yeah, Clark. You should talk to Clark. Because anybody who's named Clark has to like paperwork, right? Um, so I went to Clark and I said, listen, if I send people your way, will you basically do all the work for me and split me 50-50? He's like, of course. That sounds like a great deal. And I was like, really? Okay. And so I did. So I would spend maybe a half hour or so with somebody, teach them, hey, you could cash out equity from your home, invest in real estate, create more cash flow that would actually more than not just pay your mortgage payment, but then give you extra cash flow above and beyond. And people are like, that's incredible. Yeah. Well, how do I do it? What kind of mortgage do I get? Talk to Clark. And I would do that. And then about a month or so later, I see a check show up. And here's the crazy thing. Clark, by the way, did not actually reduce his fees. Clark had an abundance mentality. Clark says, no, I'm going to charge a standard 1% origination fee, not 0.5% like Chris is doing. So Chris is getting paid 0.5% for doing a lot less work, even though that was the same thing he was doing, trying to do it himself, because I had a scarcity mentality. Now I'm sharing the wealth, and now I'm getting paid 1,000 or 2,000 bucks a month from that. And I was like, well, that's cool. Who else can I, are there other companies? So there's a wholesale jeweler in Salt Lake City. I would say I would get a 5% kickback because people at my age in the 20s, right, were getting married or engaged. I would say, don't buy it from these stores. Don't buy it from Jared or Zales or whatever. Buy it over here. You'll get like for a third of the cost if you buy it from this wholesale jeweler. And then they're like, yeah, I saved so much money. Thank you. And then I get it. Not only would my friends thank me, but then I get a check from that wholesale jeweler, right? And that wouldn't make much. It'd be like 50 bucks here or there. But it was like, it opened my mind to like the possibility of like, oh, I can create win-wins by creating a win-win-win as well, not just creating a win-win. And then when I went to real estate and doing stuff that way, it's like, how do I create the win-win? And it became very, very like, okay, how do we not screw people over, but how do we actually make this where it makes sense? And money all of a sudden made sense. It was less formulaic. And then when I did do investing and I was like, I turned my starter home into a rental. That was one of the things I did. By the way, I turned that rental. What I did, I sold my starter home to an investor at full appraisal, then leased it back, basically rented it back from that investor, and then rented it out. So I subleased it so I was able to strip all the equity out. And so I didn't have debt, quote unquote, although the new investor did. I had to pay him more than his mortgage payment, but then I'd turn around and lease it to and rent it to another renter. So I was like, strip out the equity and I could turn it into a rental for my starter home, right? And I could take my money, I could lend it out to real estate investors who at that time paid a lot more than what I would say is reasonable today. They were paying like, 2, 3 plus percent a month on that money to borrow it, right? So a lot of hard money loans and stuff. And that's what kind of got me there. When people say, well, how'd you do it? That's exactly how I did it. Lending money, turn my starter home into a rental after I stripped out all the equity. And then of course I had these like this occasional money coming in from like mailbox money from connections, right? Whether it's mortgages or wholesale jewelers or whatever. And that's where I got to like 4 or 5,000 a month.
That's incredible. Wow. Yeah. So, a few things I definitely want to double tap on is when you talk about, well, one, just starting again with the mindset.
Mhm.
And I believe it's Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're
Mhm.
right. And I think that very much comes into play here with regards to money and relationships and your career. And if I'm looking through a place of lack, right? That's my
Yeah.
lens. Everything is lack, everything is scarce. Then that's how I'm going to show up and present myself in the world and in my business. If I come from an abundant mindset, things are going to work out for me. This is exactly the path that I'm going to take to achieve my dreams and my goals and my hopes or whatever it is for you, then that is what I'm gonna call in. Because we
Yeah.
get in life what we focus on. And with a conviction in my bones, I have seen that over and over and over and over again. So the narrative that we tell ourselves, whether it's true or whether it's false, really matters. So I always tell my clients or when I'm doing keynotes, pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. Like, how do you talk to yourself? What are the thoughts that you have? Are they empowering? Are they like, hey, we've got this? Or is it full of what's lacking or what's missing and all the negative things? Because if you think
Yeah.
something's possible, it is. And clearly for you, 2 times over, it is possible. If you lose it all, you can get it back. And you were able to do that. And truly, evidence is the loudest voice. Another thing that you said is value. What can you do to add more value? So maybe for those that are listening or watching us right now, you are not a business owner, but you are obviously in some part of your career, whatever that trajectory is for you. Find a way to add more value, right? Maybe you want a promotion or you want something or you're looking for something different. Find a way to add more value. That will always have some sort of return on your investment, right? You're investing in yourself, you're investing in, what you can do in your particular craft or area of expertise. Start there. What can you do to add more value? And clearly, you've cornered the market in that with real estate and how are you able to do that as the anti-financial advisor, which PS I absolutely love that, so I want to keep saying it. It's so incredible. And then the last thing, Chris, that I definitely wanted to highlight for our listeners is when you said, you hired your clerk. And I think all of us have that potentially in our lives. Who is your clerk? What is the thing that is not in your zone of genius that you could potentially delegate or outsource or hire? So for me, I've been a podcast host for a few years now. And as most of us, we're scrappy, we're gritty, we're going to do it ourselves. This is my baby. I built my tactical harmony business and podcast from the ground up. But I don't like video editing.
Mhm.
That's not my zone of genius. You want me on a stage, you want me behind the microphone. You don't want me to create social media content or thumbnails or video editing. But there are brilliant minds out there, and he's going to be watching this when he edits this video. Thank you, Ben, that are so capable and they love to do this and they make a business around it. So the moment, the second that I hired Ben, oh, I just felt a weight lifted off of my chest. I felt more energized. I had more capacity to do more of the things that I loved rather than spending the time doing things that I didn't love that weren't in my wheelhouse. Sure, I learned and I did it, but that is a game changer. And Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time, I saw him at a recent, well, not recent, it was 2024, but I saw him at a mastermind and my mind was blown. I'm like, what am I doing? So I made a move and I have been benefiting from it ever since. So, okay, next question for you. This might be a loaded question, but what is a very common thing most people just get dead wrong about money that drives you out of your tree?
The biggest well, boy, there's a lot.
It's probably many things.
There it's they're kind of stem from the same thing, so I'm trying to get this. The biggest one I've kind of hinted towards is the accumulation versus
Okay.
acceleration type of mindset, right? You've been taught and trained, literally trained and brainwashed by financial companies that you are to set it and forget it, right? You're supposed to lock it away, put it in that 401k prison, throw away the key, because if you try to touch your own money, well, one, you have to get fired or quit your job to do it, or two, you have to like basically get slapped with penalties and taxes to access your cash, right? Well, the problem is it's not your cash. You turn it over to the government. The government knows this, which is why the government and Wall Street got together to create the 401k. Originally, the 401k was actually for just high level executives in the 1970s because the highest tax rate was like 83%. So it made sense to try to defer your taxes to a later date because if you're paid such a high rate and you're going to live off less, that works great. But for most of us, we don't get paid millions upon millions and millions of dollars to then have such a high tax rate. We're in one of the lowest tax rates right now in history, and we're expecting that somehow it's going to get lower in the future. That means you've failed. That means you like somehow you're living in poverty rather than where you are at today, which is like a failure of a financial plan, right? Um, so that's one big one right there is switching that mindset. That's what I had to do was when I realized it was about how do I create income? For example, and this ties in with everything because there's a lot of false things with the stock market too. That stock market returns 10 or 12%. No, the last 30-year average of the S&P has been 8.38% as of last month when I got to update it again this month, but it was 8.38%, not 10, not even 12. So screw you, Dave Ramsey. Like that's not true. Like that's not it. That's the thing. Like there's all these financial experts that tout these things and say it so confidently, like it's true that you hear it so many times, you just assume it's true. 401k, that's another one. I mean, not just because you lock it in prison and it's stuck there, but the other problem too is that Fidelity, for example, which has 53 million account users with Fidelity, that's 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. There's only 1.1 million millionaires, 401k or 403b millionaires out of Infidelity. That's about a 2% success rate for millionaires. But Transamerica did another study of that and found that 35% of those same people surveyed said it'll take a miracle to be able to retire. Why? Because we've been led to believe a lie that there's a 4% rule, right? That, you save up enough money. If you get to $1 million, you can live on 4%. Well, they've updated those numbers, except for the guy that created the little rule. He says if you invest with him, you can pull out 4.7%. Talking about a sales ploy, right? But no, like they've actually said, like if you're in your 60s, it's 3%, 4% if you wait till you're 70. So think about this. If you have $1 million, which you're one of the top 2% of Fidelity account holders that have over $1 million, you can now live on $30,000 a year. You're a broke millionaire. You're literally living below the poverty line. No wonder people are fighting for Social Security still, which is going broke, right? So all that stuff is happening. The match, by the way, this is the other thing too. Fidelity using those same stats. Um, so Fidelity actually, when I looked at their target date funds, underperformed the stock market by 2.1% over the last 10 years. And they also have a minimum fee of 0.75%. That's not including all the other fees they usually tack on, depending on the plan that you have. So you're paying usually at least 1 to 2% in fees, plus it's doing over 2% under the market. Well, guess what? If you get a 100% match and you actually do the math, and you run it out, what you'll find is that the 100% match is not a 100% rate of return. Another myth, another lie, right? It actually leads to about a 2 to 3% return long term because all it does, 100% match just doubles your money down the road. So the longer you do it, that rule 72 they always talk about, right? Well, that money only doubles. And that means the longer you have the money, the less the return actually is on that match because it goes down that compounded return. So I show people a lot of times, I'm like, hey, even if you don't take out 3% for the lack of performance and stuff, if it's like 2.75%, you'll still have more money investing on your own than put it in a 401k with a 100% match
Huh.
in the same S&P. So all these things, right? Like all this stuff, like this is the thing. It's Ben Stein, if you know the guy from Ferris Bueller's Day Off,
Yes.
Bueller, that guy. His
Yes.
dad was a Harvard economist. Actually, Ben Stein also majored in economics at Harvard. Many people don't know that. His dad was an economist, and his dad told him at one point, he says, "Ben, figures don't lie, but liars figure." And that's exactly what's been happening. So when people start to realize like they've been stuffing money in their 401k, getting the match, thinking that's a good thing, but then the evidence shows that only 2% get to $1 million. And even then, that's not enough for people to do it. You start to realize it just doesn't work. So, like, for example, I had a guy come to me recently. He said, he's like, "Hey, I just turned 59 and a half this month. I can now access this money without a penalty. Yay. I've sacrificed forever. It's time." He goes to his Vanguard financial advisor. And his financial advisor says, "Well, I can't tell you exactly when you can retire." He's like, "Well, you're my financial advisor. Shouldn't you have the answer?" And he wouldn't give him an answer. And he said, "Chris, I'm frustrated because he didn't have an answer for me." I said, "Well, what's your cash flow goal? Like, how much income do you want?" He says, "I want." He's like, "I don't need it, Chris. I would love to have 200,000 a year just to give me plenty of flexibility. Inflation, if it gets bad or whatever, I want 200,000 a year." I said, "Well, that's your problem because your financial advisor, either one, doesn't know how to calculate it, or two, is scared to give you the answer. Because by the way, congratulations, you have 1.9 million in your 401k. That's puts you in the top 1 or 2% of all Americans in saving their 401ks. But if you live on 3% a year on 1.9 million, you're living on less than 60,000 a year. Not that that's bad, but that's not much. I mean, that's less than 5,000 bucks a month. And you have to pay taxes on that 5,000. So you really walk away with maybe 4,000 bucks a month if you're lucky, more like 3,500 a month. He's like, I was like, so for you to get there, the financial advisor, if he knows the number, would have to tell you, you have to get that number to almost $7 million. You have to go from 1.9 to 7 million. He says, Chris, I don't mind working till I'm 70. I just want it to feel like I'm forced to work until I'm 70. And I said, here's the difference. And this is important because this is where that mindset shift really has to happen. I said, here's the difference. Like, there's hands off real estate investments. When I talk about investing in real estate, this is not buying the property in your backyard necessarily, right? This is like, I can invest with other real estate investors doing the things. I can invest in self storage, apartments, raw land, oil and gas. Like, I can literally be in these private deals versus being in like, actually like buying the property in my backyard that sucks, and then I'm dealing with tenants, toilets, and trash, right? I can even buy properties anywhere in the country, even Ohio, but I don't have to manage it because I can get a property manager to manage it for me, right? Not that I'm a biggest fan of Ohio real estate, but there's a lot of people that are, and so I could do all those things. I could be out in the West and buy out things out East, which I do. I have properties out East that I don't even know who the tenants' names are, but I know they have leases and I know they're renting, right? Well, here's the thing. I told him, I said, listen, like most of these type of investments we have, at minimum, usually pay about 10% a year of income, like actual income that's paying. So if you have $1.9 million, right? What does that mean if you make 10%? He's like, well, that's 190,000 a year. I'm like, right. What's your goal? 200,000. I'm like, cool. Here's what you do. 190,000 a year, you make that, you reinvest 190,000, you'll make about an extra 20,000 next year. You'll be at 210,000 next year. You could retire when you're 60. I said, but that's not all because there's more. Because I have this like passive income calculator on our website, and I told him, like, well, basically it's for my brain, so I can calculate it in my head. I said, you mentioned you have an investment property, right? He's like, I do. Cool. How much do you make profit per month on that? He's like, oh, after all the expenses and everything, 300 bucks a month. Like, okay, how much equity do you have? $800,000 of equity. I said, you realize you could sell that property, even if you walked away with 700,000, put it into a CD, and you'll still make more than what you're making right now on that cash flow. But again, most people get in their mind like, oh, well, once I pay off the mortgage, you'll be fine. But usually they find out like, oh, it's still not that much, right? Depending on where they have the property. And I said, yeah, that's not that much. I was like, but if we could sell that property, say we take the 700,000 and then do make also 10%, that's 70,000 plus your 190,000. You're now at 260,000 a year. You could retire this year. And he's like, wow, that's awesome. He's like, I don't even need to retire, but he's like, that's amazing. I was like, there's no difference. And people have even asked me, like, is that too good to be true? I'm like, oh, trust me, it's not. There's real estate investors. Most of those investors are making, they think 10% sucks. This is why there's more millionaires made in real estate than there ever is in the stock market. And this comes from a guy who not only was a financial advisor, but I didn't mention this, I was also a stock trader, stock and options trader who taught people how to trade stocks and options. And I met some great stock and options traders. And at best, those guys would hope to make 20, 25% a year. In fact, look at George Soros, right? he's pretty popular, especially in politics, even though he's an investor. His average has been about 25%. Warren Buffett, who's not even a stock investor, he's really a business purchaser, right? He buys businesses. His average is roughly about 25% a year or 24% a year. So you look at those guys barely make anything, and they're the rare few. So most people in the stock market are lucky to ever see 10% a year anyways themselves. And now grant take away the last, 10, 15 or so years, right? People are like, I had one guy tell me, he's like, I made 14% since 2018. Then I did the math and I went back and he was doing his own trading. And I did the math. I said, well, guess what? You could have just been in the SP 500 and made 14.1% since that same time in 2018. I'm like, that's not because you were awesome. That's just because you rode a market wave that's way overvalued right now. And the market, by the way, is way overbought. It's overdue for a crash. It's at the point where it's more than double where it should be. Imagine what happened in your life right now if all of a sudden you lost more than half your money in the stock market today. That's the kind of precarious situation we're in right now, and because it's been going up for 17 years, which has been the best I've seen ever since the 20th century, right? We're over 100 years, we've never had the stock market do what it's done the last 17 years. Like, we're just massively overdue for correction, and most people, especially if they're under the age of 40, have never seen the stock market go down. That's the risk we're dealing with right now. So there's all these myths. I know I just rambled on a bunch of them, but all these things combined, we just believe that somehow the stock market is the answer, that we just accumulate this wealth and it works. But the evidence shows otherwise. Where, on the other hand, what I do with people, right, and where we help them connect them to deals and help them strategize it and things like that, like those people see immediate results and they actually have real cash coming in their pocket. It's not like, oh, I've got this much on a computer screen. I hope the market doesn't crash to where I don't have as much anymore. It's like this is real money coming in to pay them each and every month or every quarter.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, is the word sad that you have to say it's real money. You can get results quicker than you think. It's possible. It's possible for me, it's possible for you. And, for those that are interested, excuse me, in Chris's business, go on his website, look at the testimonials, and we'll make sure all the links and the show links are in the notes below here. But you're gonna see, real people, real results, average people, average results, and it's incredible. And it's just it's almost maddening, Chris, that we were taught, and I'll pick on myself here. I was taught to, as a former Fed, I was taught that you need to max out your TSP, your thrift
Mhm.
savings plan, and just make it aggressive. I started my federal agent career when I was very young, in my early 20s. So max it out. You'll be smart. You're going to get over 1 million. You'll be good to go. Be aggressive. You've got this. And that was it. No one taught anybody. There were no money classes. There was nothing. And it's funny that we're talking about real estate and the immense benefits of investing and all of the things, because I recently went through a wealth mastermind with Tony Robbins, and he brings in all of these amazing, wonderful people. And one of the biggest well, there were so many takeaways with Tony Robbins. Think he knows a thing or two about money, being a billionaire and having all these companies. But one of the things was unallocated assets. And we're taught to put all of our money into one thing, and you need to have this diversity, and don't put all your eggs into one basket. And they had some famous real estate investors come on, and folks that are just basically pulling the wool out from over your eyes and saying, wow, there's this all of this ability out there to invest and to make money, and you can do this. You don't need to be a multimillionaire to become one, or to become financially free, whatever that looks like for you. So the example you gave of that gentleman that was like, yeah, 200K, I don't need it, but that would be awesome. Well, for someone else, it could be 500K. For someone else, it could be 100K, right? And so I just remember feeling like, wow, why don't they teach this in school? Why don't they make this like a life lesson for people, that there's so many ways that we can have our money work for us and make passive income, rather than be a slave to your job? Which, again, I love my parents. They are amazing, wonderful people, incredible hard workers. But that was the mentality I grew up with, right? They worked in their factory for over 40 years, beyond impressive, right?
Yeah.
Like 40 years, right? And they retired, but they didn't want to do that. They did
Mhm.
it It put a roof over my head, food in my belly, but come on. And so I told myself at a young age, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm gonna get my college education, I'm gonna travel and see the world, and I'm gonna be financially free. So, yeah, incredible stuff. So let me ask you this question, switching gears slightly. You don't work because you have to, right? Like, you're working because you enjoy it and you like to help people and empower them, which is why you're sitting across from me right now.
Mhm.
So, in the time that you do work, or invest in your business, what do you decide, or how do you decide what earns your time? Being in such a position of
Mm.
financial freedom, like, how do you decide what earns your time and attention, Chris?
At the end of the day, for me, it's impact. Like, I told my team, like, I've started to hire people to help do some of the stuff. I had to make a pretty important decision. It's funny in 2020, you know how we all had time because pretty soon everything's closed. And I was looking at stuff. I was like, maybe I should buy a franchise. And I was looking at like a few different options. Like, should I rent to hair salon, owners, or should I, do a run gym, something like that. And then I realized, like, why not just double down on money ripples? Because I was already part-time in Money Ripples. I was self-employed, making over 1,000,000 a year, ironically. Um, and I was just, mainly doing my podcast. And that's the thing, I love teaching, and I wanna make sure it makes a difference. And so if it's not moving the needle to help more people and create more awareness, then it's not worth my time. And that's really what everything drives me now. I mean, that's why I hired the guy just recently, just like last week, hired a guy that works on like Mr. Beast's, philanthropy channel and Andrea Bocelli's channel and stuff. I was like, hey, my YouTube, I would like to get some help on this because I just grow it organically. I don't pay to have, people do stuff or get fake, likes and stuff like that. I just do it all organic, and I'm going for a very niche person too, because I realized I didn't wanna be like Dave Ramsey in the sense of teaching to the general public. I'm more like for the Dave Ramsey poster child, the one that said, "Hey, I did everything he asked, and I don't feel like it's enough," right? I want the person that's more like, older millennial or Gen Xer who's like saying, "You know what? I'm a critical thinker. I actually like to question things because I know that not everybody teaches truth." I know that financial advisor will never tell me to buy real estate because they don't make money off of it. So they're gonna tell me to buy their crap, right? 'Cause to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like people that actually wanna use their brains and say, maybe I wanna be like reasonable about this or question this. Can I do something better? Can I live a better life? Those are the people I like to call out. And that's what keeps me going. Because trust me, owning a business, even if you're at a place you don't need to, owning a business is not easy. Being a leader and a visionary is not easy. It'd be way easier for me to just go drink pina coladas on the beach. But I'll tell you this from personal experience because this happened to me in the early 2017 after I did it the second time. And I was like spending time like living in California for a few months just to try it out and see how it was. And I was the most depressed I was in my life. Like I was so depressed that I didn't have a purpose. I still kept doing my podcast, right? I like banked some episodes, but I was doing like one a week, So I was like, man, like I feel like I need something more. I was getting antsy. And I think that's what it is. Like with great power comes great responsibility, for quoting Spider-Man, Um, that's what it was for me. It was like I felt like I had this responsibility that I want to create a ripple effect. That's why our company's called Money Ripples, right? It's like, what do you do when you have that money and you have that freedom? You just live with your family and enjoy it, or do you do something more with it? And that's another thing that our people do too, is that they're not just trying to get rich. They want to live a rich life. They want to bless others as they're blessed financially as well.
Amen. Yeah, and a wealth is an expression of self.
Mm,
And what
yes.
is rich to me is different than what is rich to you, and I think that is so beautiful and divine, and I'm really glad that you called that out, because for anyone listening or watching us right now, you have something that you want, right? Like, let's say you aren't financially free, which is probably the majority of us.
Mhm.
What would that look like? Like, I want your brain to visualize it, feel it, smell it, touch it, taste it, right? Is it you wanna travel the world? Is it that you wanna have a pina colada on the beach? Is it that you're like me and you wanna be nestled in the mountains of Montana with no neighbors in sight? That's my dream, which I'm looking at right now. So I guess I'm, winning a little bit. But whatever it is, like maybe you have children and you want them to not have to worry about money, or you want them to have a certain lifestyle. I want you to double down on that and really think about it. Let that allow that to serve as leverage on yourself, right? Like,
Mhm.
Chris can do it. I can do it, right? All of his amazing clients are doing it right now. So can you. But we got to start, right? We got to take that first step. And that's something that we hammer here in Tactical Harmony. Knowledge isn't enough, right? It's
Mhm.
potential power, but if you are not moving and executing and taking inspired action, it is absolutely useless. You have to move, you have to take action. So we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to switch gears away from money for a moment and ask you about ballroom dancing. I think that is so incredibly cool. When we first were introducing ourselves, I learned about your ballroom dancing, which I think is such an incredible talent. I would love to hear, Chris, what does ballroom dancing teach you about leadership and timing and trust?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I learned from ballroom dancing yeah, a lot of things about it's not just about working hard at it, right? It's not just about learning the steps. It's about doing the steps well. Um, and there's a difference, right? Because when I first got it, by the way, I never even got into dancing because I was a natural dancer. I got into it because I found out I was one credit shy of full time because I did all my college math in high school. And so they weren't transferring over. So I signed up for a math class. And then when I got there, they said, oh, we'll take those credits after all. I was like, well, I'm one credit shy of full time. What am I going to do? Should I do a PE class or whatever? And I heard a girl talking to a guy saying, hey, you should do this class. There's lots of girls in this class. It was at the registration area, you know? I was like, I don't know what the class that is. So I snuck over to like look to see what it was. And it was a social dance class. I was like, girls, I'm 18 years old and have lots of hormones. Sounds great to me.
Sign me
And I
up.
got into it. I sucked. But I did another semester, got better, and eventually I started doing ballroom and things like that. And eventually I got onto the world championship team. That's what moved me actually to Utah because the two championship teams in the world are both within 5 miles of each other, BYU and then Utah Valley University. So I went to Utah Valley and went there, and that's where I learned it. And it's funny when I transferred to Utah because I was at a school in Idaho at the time when I learned it. Um, I had a teacher that says, "Hey, you're doing a good job, and you know the steps, but you're not quite doing it right." And she said, "Really, what it is, it's not even about your steps; it's your center." And she started working with me on the center of balance and gravity. She's like, yeah, like you're letting it go loose. It's like if you get it tight, you get your spine just right and everything. You can spin faster. You can do all these moves better. She's like, you'll even start winning competitions. And so I started to do it, and it felt uncomfortable at first. But as I started getting the rhythm of doing it over and over, because I even tell her, like, is this right? It doesn't feel right. She's like, it may not feel right, but Chris, it looks right. And so I would keep doing it again and again. And in business, I've realized that it's the same thing. You can work hard all you want, and you can even work smart. But if you're not working right, it doesn't matter. And I see a lot of people, they work hard, they try to work smart, they even try to get their, chat GPT and Grok and Claude to tell them what to do. But it doesn't work unless you do it the right way. It's true with money, it's true with leadership, it's true with business. It's about doing it right. And if you do it, you can actually save yourself a lot of effort and a lot of wasted time by doing the wrong habits, right? I remember hearing a mentor of mine saying that, you know, practice does not make perfect, practice makes permanent. And if you do the wrong practices, you'll just create these bad habits that go on forever, right? And so you can apply that to all kinds of things in life, but that's what I've learned from dancing specifically.
Yeah, and that's so true. And even before we hit the record button today, we were talking about the power of intentionality and where you're investing your time, which is, in my humble opinion, the greatest asset that's out there, the greatest currency, and we don't know how much time we have left. So where we are investing it. And I know for me, I don't want to just go through the motions and be blind and be so lackadaisical. I want to live with, I'm deliberate about my time and my energy and my life force and what how I am spending my days and my time and my habits. And so you want to do it right. And you find that you're going to get more results from those few things you do rather than just, run around like a chicken with your head cut off and you're so busy, but you're really not getting results. And God, does that pertain to money? But it pertains to so many things. So it really does require a level of introspection and it requires some training and getting yourself in the right rooms with the right people who are doing the thing that you want. You learn from them, you collapse time, and you understand how to do it the right way. So,
Exactly.
last question for you before we part ways. And I ask this of every guest. What is one takeaway or message that you would like to leave our audience with here today? as it pertains to either leadership, mindset, or performance?
There's an African proverb is that if you want to go far, go alone, but if you want to go fast, go together, right? And kind of builds on what you just said there is that I've learned like the wormhole, right? If you want to collapse time, right? If you're going to get all scientific, if you want to create a wormhole and get there faster, it is like how do you work with others, and especially if you find the right people, the right mentors. If you're looking for any mentor, look for somebody who's been there, they've done it, and they're still doing it today, right? That's what's so important. That's why, like, I'm still like my own life is my laboratory, and it always has been, right? And that's what you want to look for. Like when I look for mentors, I look for people as like, are they actually doing it? They're not just saying they can do it, but they actually can apply it in their lives and make it work. Those are the best mentors, the best people that I like to follow. Even when I follow podcasts, it's the same thing. So that's what my advice is look for someone who's been there, done that, and still doing it today.
Absolutely love it. Chris, you dropped so many amazing gems for all of us today. And, I truly appreciate you imparting your wisdom. Where can we send people to find you, to learn more about you, and potentially hire you in your business?
Yeah, just look up anything Money Ripples, whether it's moneyripples.com. That's where that passive income calculator is. You also have at Money Ripples on social media or the Money Ripples podcast we have on all podcasting platforms, including YouTube.
Awesome. I will make sure that all those links are listed in the show notes below. And with that, Chris, I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day ahead. Thank you for being an amazing guest. I know that everyone has been probably taking copious notes. If not, click the replay button, take those notes, and start now. Chris, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.